Hey everyone, welcome to the second part of our conversation about EIGRP named mode operation with regard to authentication. And what I want to do is revisit where we were when we walked away from our previous section. What was happening was I had the configuration set up between R1 and this idea of Cat1, and I was not able to get my connections up and operational. We were using the idea of our SHA-256 authentication digest method, and what we wanted to do is just verify that that is indeed still the case. So let's see, I'll cut over to R1, show IP EIGRP neighbors, and we have the relationship formed with 12, which is Cat2, but nothing with Cat1. Show run section router EIGRP. And we can see right here is where we have the authentication mode HMAC SHA-256 IPexpert. Now, what I did to minimize our troubleshooting is I took the digest key off. I went ahead and just removed the keychain. So all we're doing is using the pure configs, and I did that on R1 and on Cat1. So let's take a look and see what we have here. Notice I just simply removed the keychain. Now the keychain is not necessary. The keychain is just something that we can use to make things a little bit more complicated and allows us the capability of being able to do our key rotation, just like we did in the context of RIP, RIP-NG, and our regular conversations about classic EIGRP. Now what I want to illustrate here is, again, we do not have the ability to be able to form this peering relationship. Let's illustrate that. So on Cat1 I'm going to say debug EIGRP packets, and I want to debug hello packets. And let's see what happens here. We should start seeing some output that's going to tell us about this idea of our failure. And let's see what's going on. And notice it tells me authentication mismatch. Well, notice here it says key ID 0. So we have a 0, so that's a null key. But the main thing here is notice it's coming back and giving me this authentication mismatch. Now what I want to do is I'm going to fire up Wireshark. So let's do that. Let's come over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my Wireshark session for R1. So let's pick R1 Ethernet 00. And I'll advance my drawing over so we don't have to look at that. And here is our trace. Now what I want to do is, first of all, I want to filter just purely on EIGRP. EIGRP. And what I want to do is I want to look at a hello. And I want to look at a hello that's traveling from my device, which is going to be 10.1.101.1. So that's R1 going to my multicast address range of 224.0.0.10. Let's look at Cisco here. And what I want to do is I want to scroll down, and we're going to see this area right here. This area right here says I am using authentication using SHA-256. Now what I'll do is I'm going to actually hit the down arrow here, so I'll look at some of the particulars associated with this. And one of these particulars is really important to me, and it's a sample of my digest. So notice that right there. That value right there is my digest. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out part of this. I'm going to write out my part, which is 148 2D9F. All right. In fact, I'll take my head out of the equation so here I don't block it. So this is on R1 going out to EIGRP. Now, ... because there's more. There's even more than what we see here. But let's take a look at another one. So let's look at anything coming from 11. So that's going to be 10.1.101.11. So this is coming from Cat1 going to us. And we should also see here the fact that we're using SHA. And let's take a look at our digest key here. Well, this digest key, we don't have to go very far to realize that our keys, our digests, are not right. So I have 9280A1C ... Well, this and this do not equal. So by virtue of the fact that my digests don't match, I know I'm not going to be able to form a peering relationship. So why would my digests not match? Because if I do look at my equipment, and I'll go ahead and remove myself here, if I go over and take a look at my gear, based on my show commands that I just executed, let me go ahead and U-all this. Show run section router. Based on my configuration, notice I have IPexpert. So if I were to draw this out, I have Cat1 connected to R1 00 VLAN 101 on this side, and I'm using IPexpert and IPexpert, all lowercase. On both of these devices. But if I did that, then my mask or my digest would equal, and it doesn't. It is not equal. And here's why. First of all, it's important to understand that these passwords or these values are case sensitive. And also, a space can impact whether or not this is even going to actually work. Now the problem is there's not a show command that I can execute that I'm aware of that's going to give me the idea or the listing of what my password is. Now, when I look at this on the equipment, there is a way that I can actually see something, and I'll tell you what I did. When I did my configuration, I intentionally put a space after IPexpert on R1. Now let's look at that. So if I grab my pen here and I whoop, that's not what I wanted to do. If I highlight IPexpert and I drag it all the way down to the next line, notice there's no space here. However, if I go to R1 and execute the same configuration or the same process, go all the way down, notice that there is sufficient enough space here at the end to represent the fact that I entered space there. So my passwords are not the same. So let's fix this and see what happens if we can bring this up. So what I need to do is grab my eraser, get rid of this. Actually, I'll just take all of this out and bring my drawing back. Scroll down or up until I can grab all of this. Config T, Command V, and what I want to do now is I want to modify this value right here. So I'm going to say, first of all, no. Take that command out. Then what I'm going to say is I'm going to say authentication mode HMAC-SH-256 IPexpert with no space, and I'll hit enter, and hopefully I should be able to bring my connection up now. And what we'll see is my adjacency has now been formed. So at first blush, this may seem like much ado about nothing. But what I'm trying to do is highlight some of the things that you can find in your configurations that may be stumbling blocks, especially if you don't pay attention to what you are doing with regard to how you enter these passwords. Now what we've done is we brought this connection up. Let's look at the output for our detail configuration. So end, show IPEIGRP, interface, detail, and I want to look at E00. And what we're going to see here is notice my authentication mode is not set, but I do not, is operational, but I do not have a keychain. Let's add our keychain and see what happens to our configuration now. So if I say config T, router, EIGRP, named, address family IPv4, autonomous system 10, and then come up, let me go ahead and get my mouse out of the way here. And then what I do is I'm going to say AF interface E00, and I'm going to say authentication keychain. The keychain that I want to use is going to be EIGRP_auth, the same thing that we used for our message digest. And what we're going to see is my link is going to go down. The reason is my keychain changed. The output on the console is going to tell me exactly what the problem was. Well, let's go over to Cat 1 and do the matching configuration. So config T. And here what I'm going to say is I'm going to say router EIGRP named, address family IPv4, autonomous system 10, AF interface for the address family interface configuration for VLAN 101. And now what I'll do is say authentication keychain EIGRP_auth, and my connection should come back up. So let's wait for it and see what happens. And there it is. Comes up, says new adjacency. Actually, I'll twist my body out. Well, I'll try to twist my body out. New adjacency. So we can understand now that this is operational. Let's go back over to R1 and execute the show IP interfaces detail command, and now notice it's telling me what keychain I'm using. So it says I'm using EIGRP_auth. Let's go back to Cat 1 and repeat that debug. So now we'll come up here and say debug IP, debug EIGRP, packets, and I want to look at hellos. Now let's see what happens. Grab me a sip of coffee while I'm waiting. Notice it tells me, we'll wait for it, receive packet with SHA authentication. So now what we've illustrated here is a combination of using the HMAC-SH-256 authentication method and also at the same time entangling keychains in this operation. If I were to go under and go in here and do the change the accept lifetime and the send lifetime, I could actually rotate these keys and everything would be good to go. Now, the other part of this is we also want to pay attention to the fact that you all show run section router. What I want you to see here is that my password is still being illustrated here in clear text. Well, let's go ahead and make a change to this. Let's say config T service let's see here, sir. And I'm going to say password encryption, and I'm going to turn it on. Now let's take a look at this. Show run section router. And now notice right now it's come up and it's giving me a hash. Now this isn't over the shoulder security. This is just so that someone couldn't look over my shoulder and see this password. But the question becomes, well, if that's the case, then if I don't know what the password is, how can I do the calculation against it? Well, so first of all, let's grab this. Excuse me, and we'll go over to R1 and do the same thing. Service, password encryption, do show run section router EIGRP. Let's scroll up to where we can see what we're looking for here, and notice this value right here, 020. Now, at first blush, we would imagine that these would be the same, but they're not. And again, all this is just Cisco's way of being able to protect the password from someone looking over our shoulder and seeing it. In fact, there are any number of tools that can break this if you can get the exact code and put it in. But the main thing that I want to illustrate here is the fact that it's just a way for us to offer ourselves another layer of security that is going to be able to control how we're going to work with this idea of our authentication mode. Now, another element here is let's do a show run section keychain. Notice that it also gave the over-the-shoulder security to my keychain configurations. Again, very easily hacked. if someone can actually copy that and put it into a software program that can break it out. But the main thing here is for us to understand the fact that all we're doing is offering ourselves another layer of protection with regard to our configurations, and we could be asked to be able to do this type of thing. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, in the confines of my EIGRP process, I can take this value and I could paste it into a device. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this AF interface config. So I'll just copy and grab all of this. And what I want to do is I'm going to say authentication mode, take myself out here, and I'm going to say HMAC SHA 256. And what I'm going to put here is the encryption type. So I could use 0, in other words, to disable the encryption, which means the password that I'm going to be putting in is unencrypted, so just take it at its normal value. Or I could go all the way up to 7 for Cisco's proprietary solution. So if I enter 7 here, and then I typed in that value, whatever that value was, I just arbitrarily picked the value, the system is going to know that what I'm doing is I'm entering this password in a Cisco proprietary encrypted format. That's what that 7 indicates. So the idea is that, again, I have the capability of being able to hide my passwords from people who may be looking over my shoulder, but at the same time, I have not lost the ability to simply be able to copy those encrypted, if you'll excuse the term, passwords into my running configuration. So with that being said, that's going to wrap up our conversations about our configurations and any type of diagnostics that we can do with regard to setting up our authentication. And just pay careful attention to the fact that an extra space at the end can cause a world of problems, and in the heat of the moment when you're trying to resolve something in the lab, it's something that's very, very easy to overlook. That's why I highly recommend that when you have a problem like that and you think you use the same password, highlight that line in the bottom line, the line below it, and you may see the fact that you have a space at the end of your password. And that can cause you a world of hurt in the confines and the context of the lab. All right, let's move on to some more conversations about EIGRP Classic and named mode operation. See you guys in the next series.